Distinguished members of the IAPC, dear board members and delegates, first of all, I would like to start by thanking you for your kind invitation extended to me to be a keynote speaker in your conference. I wish your 53rd annual conference, which you organized online for the first time, success and to have inspiring results for the delegates from all around the world. Both your association and Congress are extremely important and valuable for the advocacy of democracy and democratic values on a global scale. I highly respect the fact that you've been steadily advocating democracy for 53 years, as well as the symbolization of this advocacy through the democracy medal you present. Dear delegates, human history is full of tragedies caused by authoritarian and totalitarian models of government. Democracy, which we can define as the law and morality of equal and free living, is the most effective tool we have against such tragedies. Democracy makes it possible to be different, yet equal. Democracy gives the majority the right to rule and the minority the right to exist. Most importantly, democracy lays the groundwork for social life to be shaped by common wisdom and conscience. We can think of democracy as people's immune system against the viruses of authoritarianism and totalitarianism. However, we know through coronavirus that sometimes the immune system might get sick itself and may hurt the body instead of protecting it. Unfortunately, this type of immunity sickness is experienced in many parts of the world today. Democracy is fighting itself, harming its own existence. When we look at some countries from a distance, it might seem that the institutions of democracy remain in place and a democratic process prevails. But the real life indicates the opposite. Check and balance mechanisms are virtually dysfunctional. Basic requirements of democracy, such as separation of powers, freedom of the process, and the right of organization, are a thing of the past. The power and authority accumulated in the hands of the political power can increase so much that the very existence of democracy becomes questionable. From the outside, the written and unwritten rules of democracy might seem to be in force. But these rules are now understood and interpreted differently. For example, elections are now seen as a source of legitimacy for the majoritarian, authoritarian, and anti-democratic practices of governments, not as a pluralist practice where the will of citizens from the different backgrounds is reflected on the government. Ultimately, the virus of totalitarianism continues to mutate into a form of authoritarian populism, so to speak, shattering peace, tranquility, and human ideals. Of course, authoritarian populist governments did not emerge in a day. These governments grew and gained strength in a suitable climate shaped by factors such as the changing structure of the world economy, social polarization, increasing digitalization, and the new media order. These governments, on one hand, were fed by polarization. On the other hand, they further deepened the polarization. Authoritarian populist governments, on one hand, made use of digital media and the dynamics of the post-truth era. On the other hand, with the propaganda machines, they enabled prejudices, emotions, and personal opinions to get ahead the objective truths. Dear delegates, all over the world, interest and confidence in democratic and rational politics have declined. The level of political participation has declined. Trust in politicians has declined. The raison d'etre of political parties is questioned. A social and political polarization based on identity and beliefs is infecting many countries and many societies today. The relations of societies with the reality are becoming problematic, and their progress and change mechanism have to begun to deteriorate. Today, there is a demand to remove politics from the rational ground, and there is a conscious international effort for this endeavor. Efforts are being made to degrade politics into becoming only a component of world of identities, beliefs, feelings, prejudices. All political issues are deliberately being reduced to two brackets, one of us and one of them. We are familiar with the example of building physical walls between us and others from the Cold War era. On the other hand, today's walls are built in social, political, and cultural aspects of life, and in the traditional and digital media. Seeing the other as worthless, bad, or an enemy is desired to become a social and political norm again in today's world. A kind of clash of lifestyles, or as Samuel Huntington famously called it, as clash of civilization, is being built both among people and countries. Today, populist politics is carried out with the idea that we are enough for ourselves, we need no one else. The language of politics is being based on the idea that we do not need the truth. Our reality is enough for us. We all now know very well the painful consequences in the past caused by legitimization of ignoring the truth and the other. We have enough understanding of how the legitimacy to ignore the other can quickly and uncontrollably become a legitimacy to destroy the other. For this reason, we urgently and at all costs have to ensure that a democratic, egalitarian, and humanist understanding of politics prevails. The crisis we are facing is not a crisis that can be solved by the change of authoritarian populist governments. Unfortunately, that is because the climate of perception created by the age of polarization and post-truth can affect the entire political sphere with its opposition and its power, even though at different scales. Political parties in favor of democracy and freedom also sometimes surrender to a polarizing language, an approach that puts prejudices and emotions before reality in order to consolidate their constitutions and achieve success in the elections. They can copy the way authoritarian populist governments do politics. Populism in one country can quickly affect other countries. Authoritarianism in one country can quickly be copied by other countries. Their role. I think we need a new generation understanding of politics that will reshape politics altogether. And I believe that cities, local governments, and local politics are very important in the development of this understanding. Cities are historically considered to be the strongholds of democracy. Indeed, cities are places where the culture of democracy is born and developed in terms of the facilities and opportunities they offer. Cities are unique meeting places. Diversity, difference, polyphony, and colorfulness are inherent in cities. Also, the more a city can tolerate polyphony, colorfulness, and vast diversity, the wealthier it can be. Colorfulness and polyphony is an existential problem for the city in economic, social, and cultural terms. Cities that lose their color, diversity, and tolerance rapidly lose their economic and commercial values as well. They quickly move away from being a center of attraction. For this reason, preserving and strengthening tolerance in cities is not only a principled choice, but also an obligation for all visionary local administrators. On the other hand, when compared to the central government, people have the opportunity to reach and influence the administrators of cities much more easily than and directly. The opportunities and habits of participating in the administration at the city level are much more than the opportunities of citizens to participate in the central government. Thanks to such characteristics, cities will continue to offer very important potentials for democracy in the future as in the past. Of course, we cannot say that cities produce democratic life on their own and under all circumstances. However, we can say that the sense of freedom and equality in the spirit of the city encourages the rulers of the city to behave more rationally and more equitably. On the other hand, some themes that priorities of macro policy prevailing countrywide lose their importance in the face of practical issues of city life. If your streets are full of garbage, the traffic and public transport problems drive you crazy. The political agendas centered on the lifestyles, values, beliefs, and identity issues may not seem so urgent and meaningful to you. The problems of city life inevitably lead people to think and act in a practical and rational way. Therefore, the dynamics of political polarization are not as effective in local politics as they are in general politics. Those who rule the country may feel much more comfortable in explaining, for example, major economic problems by linking them to some external powers, mysteries, lobbies. But the city managers cannot be so comfortable in finding excuses for the daily problems of the urban life. They absolutely have to find solutions fast. All this means that local politics could immensely contribute to a new politics approach that will save the world from the authoritarian populism. Of course, the new generation politics concept will not emerge from one person's mind or experience. It will rather be shaped by a synthesis of ideas and experiences from all over the world. The rule of a democratic, humanistic, political environment, as well as an equalitarian and libertarian approach, will be established with common wisdom and solidarity. Distinguished delegates of Iapc conference, therefore, I deem it meaningful to share my experiences and the outcomes I deduced from the elections for Mayor of Istanbul. Let me first briefly touch upon why the 2019 Istanbul mayoral elections were repeated for a second time. Because the incidents which happened during that period clearly showcases the authoritarian populist mindset. Yes, there was a mayoral election rerun for Istanbul in 2019. That is because the political authorities that have been ruling Istanbul for a quarter century asserted that we won the first elections by engaging in fraud and that we stole their votes. They did this in spite of the existence of a system where the officers appointed by themselves managed the entire election process, including voting and counting. The Supreme Court in charge of the election management did not find this allegation rightful, but still they managed to create a preposterous excuse and a false cover under a legal disguise to repeat the elections. If the ruling party's allegations were true, how could such fraud take place while they have all the power and resources of the state? How were the votes stolen? They try to find a new answer to this question by each passing day. For example, one day they said that we cheated on the voters list. The other day, they put forth a conspiracy theory about the assignment of the poll workers. The next day, they asserted that we cheated while the votes were being counted. They were so desperate to prove their illogical allegations that they even suggested fraud only in the mayoral ballot for Istanbul, which was placed by voters in the same envelope with 3 other ballots. These allegations suggested that the other ballots in the envelope was legal and truthful. But the 4th ballot placed in the same envelope by the same voter for the mayor of Istanbul was illegal and fraudulent. They saw that they could lose the district municipalities they have taken in the first election if they were to cancel the other 3 ballots on the same grounds as well. The deputy chair of the ruling party in charge of the elections uttered a sentence in those days which became very famous later on, which clearly shows that the ruling party did not feel obligated to put forward a logical and honorable justification to persuade the citizens. The deputy chair of the ruling party, the undergrounded fraud allegations of which were refuted one by one, said the last words on his party's behalf. Even if nothing happened, something definitely happened. This is one of the clearest indications of the ruling power's arrogance, that is disregarding the democratic values and constituents' votes. They gave this message to the citizens: we don't have to explain anything to you. I believe that this subjectivity and this attitude, looking down on citizens and disrespecting the law and democracy, is the weakest spot of all the authoritarian populist governments. And above all, it is because of this subjectivity that they will be a thing of the past. The voters gave a harsh lesson at the polls to this governance approach that has lost respect to democratic values to the extent that they don't feel obligated to explain themselves. While we won the first elections by around 15,000 votes, we succeeded in the return by a margin of 810,000 votes. Dear attendees, to be honest, I thought this experience we had in the 2019 Istanbul local elections was peculiar to us. But I am almost having a déjà vu this week. Since November 3rd, the world is watching with astonishment the events happening in the United States of America, which is one of the world's longest established democracies. Populist politicians' real goals, which are not to protect democracy and democratic values, but to preserve their seats, are obvious once again. Even in one of the world's most significant democracies, populism was leading to a process full of risks against the law, election rules, democratic values, and the government's changeover without force. The 2019 Istanbul elections were an instructive experience showing how to win elections against authoritarian populist governments by neutralizing the dynamics of polarization. I would like to share with you some important lessons that I have learned from the experience of the local elections in Istanbul. I think it will be useful for political communication experts to hear once again, even if they may seem simple. Politics is the job of producing a strong and beautiful utopia for the future of society. Truly believing in this utopia is the first condition to be able to persuade people. No matter how harsh the circumstances, talk about your utopia, not about the negativities and possible evils. Describe the beautiful future days to voters in detail. And first, you need to believe it yourself that there is room for everyone in the beautiful future you describe, and that good days will come for everyone. If you set out to fight a populist power, force that has full domination over the media, you must first start by establishing your own electoral security systems. You must use the truth and only the truth as a shield against populist politics, which uses all kinds of false claims every day to win over the voter's mind. You must be the representative of the language of love against the authoritarian populist politics that represent hatred and polarization. There is an adequate number of such politicians who do not show love and respect to the voters. Being one of them doesn't make anyone successful or happy in the long run. You should prefer a unifying and embracing politics as the opposed to the aggressive environment created by polarization, which is the essence of populist politics. What people expect from politics is respect for their own identity and values. You must respect the identities and values of all voters, especially those of your component. You should do politics knowing that you cannot without convincing your opponent's voters. Approaching everyone with respect and not judging anyone because of their origins, identity, and preferences is one of the most accurate messages that can be given to the voters. You should not allow any kind of discrimination of the other, not only in your discourse, but also in your mind. In the post-truth era, when the truth becomes insignificant and devalued, only a genuine and sincere politician who does not need any lies or fiction can win the respect of all segments. One of the most important indicators of sincerity is not to say different things to different constituencies in different geographies. The fight against populism is not won by speaking up in a debate and using a demeaning and derogatory language. A calm demeanor and a peaceful language is extremely useful in overcoming barriers of polarization. In today's polarized political life, it is a mistake for politicians to speak to their constituencies and taking only them into account most of the time. The reverb rooms on social media platforms also facilitate this kind of politics. They are not sufficiently prepared and experienced in speaking with the other party's voters. The easiest way to remedy this is to speak in an attentive language and style, always addressing the other party's voters. Politics is not an end, but a means. The aim is the happiness of the citizens. This is a perspective that should never be forgotten. Politics is more a matter of creating solutions than anything else. And the politician should be able to persuade people with their ability to provide solutions. addressing emotions in political communication is as important as addressing the mind. You need to spend more effort on the emotional side and win people's hearts than you do for using rational justifications to conquer the voter's mind in your campaigns. You cannot have greater degree of rationality than your love for your candidate. Of course, I am well aware that all these suggestions are not brand new. But we live in such a period that claiming the most basic and simplest truths has never been so transformative and more revolutionary. In this sense, I consider the new generation understanding of politics as basically embracing the democratic values that authoritarian populism has driven us away. In a democratic humanist climate, humanity has no problems that cannot be solved with an egalitarian and liberal approach. I wholeheartedly believe that wherever we confront the old politics, which is based on problems, fears, and hostility, with a new generation of politics based on the fundamental human values such as equality, freedom, love, and respect for differences, the humanity will always win. I wish you all success for the 53rd Iapc conference, and I would like to state in advance that if you decide to hold one of the upcoming conferences in Istanbul, we are fully ready to give all the support we can. Thank you very much.